The observation deck of the Galactic Council station stretched before Kyle Matthews like a window into infinity. Stars scattered across the darkness like glowing seeds planted in an endless garden. The 8-year-old boy pressed his small hands against the transparent aluminum viewport, his breath creating tiny fog circles that disappeared as quickly as they formed. He had seen this view 1,000 times before, but it never stopped making him feel small and large at the same time. Behind him, the celebration continued. Voices mixed together in dozens of languages, some human and some so alien that Kyle's translator implant struggled to keep up. His parents were somewhere in that crowd, probably talking to another ambassador or scientist who wanted to hear about their latest discovery. They were always talking to someone, always explaining something, always making humanity look good in front of the other species. Kyle turned away from the stars and looked back at the party. The grand hall was decorated with floating lights that changed colors every few seconds, blue to green to purple to gold. They drifted through the air like tiny living things, programmed to avoid hitting anyone. Tables lined the walls, covered with food from 100 different worlds. Most of it Kyle couldn't eat. Some of it would actually poison him. But there were a few human dishes mixed in, and he'd already had 3 cookies when no one was looking. His father stood near the center of the room, tall and confident in his formal uniform. Dr. Richard Matthews had the kind of smile that made people trust him immediately. He was talking to a group of Vorian diplomats, their silver skin reflecting the floating lights. They listened intently as he gestured with his hands, probably describing the new planet they'd found last month. His father always got excited when he talked about discoveries. His mother was closer to the food tables, surrounded by a different group. Dr. Catherine Matthews had dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore a blue dress that Kyle thought made her look like a princess. She was showing something on a data pad to 3 alien scientists. One of them was a Krell, tall and reptilian with amber eyes that never blinked. Kyle didn't like the Krell very much. They always seemed to be judging everyone like they thought they were better than everyone else. A hand touched Kyle's shoulder, making him jump. He turned to find Ambassador Helen Morrison smiling down at him. She was his parents' friend and Earth's main representative to the Galactic Council. Her gray hair was cut short, and she had laugh lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled. "How are you holding up, Kyle?" she asked. Her voice was warm and kind, the way adults sounded when they actually cared about the answer. "I'm okay," Kyle said. He tried to sound mature, the way his parents always told him to act at these events, just watching. Morrison knelt down so she was at his eye level. "That's a diplomatic answer if I ever heard one." She winked at him. "Your parents taught you well. But between you and me, these parties are boring, aren't they?" Kyle felt his shoulders relax. "A little bit," he admitted. "I like looking at the stars better." "Me too," Morrison said. She stood up and looked out the viewport with him. "When I was your age, I used to dream about going to space. And now here I am, living on a space station, negotiating with aliens. Funny how life works out." "Do you think I'll be an explorer like my parents?" Kyle asked. The question had been bouncing around in his head for weeks. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think you'll be whatever you want to be. But you've got good genes for it. Your parents are 2 of the best explorers humanity has ever produced. They've made first contact with peaceful species, discovered habitable worlds, and they've made the galaxy respect humanity. That's no small thing." Kyle knew she was right. 8 years ago, when humanity first joined the Galactic Council, most species saw them as newcomers who didn't deserve a seat at the table. Some species thought humans were weak because they came from an easy world. Others thought humans were dangerous because they reproduced too fast and adapted too quickly. His parents had spent years proving humanity belonged among the stars. The celebration was in honor of their latest achievement. They had discovered 3 new habitable worlds in the past 2 years. They had made first contact with 2 peaceful species who were now applying to join the Galactic Council. And they had mapped an entire sector that everyone else thought was too dangerous to explore. Kyle watched his mother laugh at something one of the scientists said. She looked happy, really happy. She'd been gone for 6 months on the last expedition, and Kyle had missed her every single day. But seeing her like this, doing what she loved, made the missing worth it. Your parents leave for their next expedition in 3 weeks, Morrison said, as if she could read his thoughts. They told me they're taking you to Earth for a vacation first. Real trees and real ocean. You excited? Yeah, Kyle said, and he meant it. He'd been born on Earth but raised on space stations. He barely remembered what real gravity felt like or how wind moved through trees. The last time they'd visited, he was only 5 years old. Morrison squeezed his shoulder gently. Make sure your parents take lots of pictures and make them rest. They work too hard sometimes. Before Kyle could respond, a commotion near the entrance made everyone turn. The floating lights dimmed slightly, as if responding to a change in mood. A group of Krell officials entered the hall, led by someone Kyle recognized from news broadcasts, Counselor Vex. He was tall even for a Krell, his scales dark green instead of the usual lighter shades. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from power. Morrison's hand tightened on Kyle's shoulder for just a second. Then she relaxed and put on a diplomatic smile. Stay here, she said quietly. I need to go say hello. Kyle watched as Morrison walked toward the entrance. His parents were already moving in that direction too, along with several other humans and aliens. Counselor Vex was important. Kyle knew that much. He was one of the 5 senior counselors who made the big decisions for the entire galaxy, and he'd never seemed to like humans very much. The Krell counselor's amber eyes swept across the room, stopping briefly on Kyle's parents. Something flickered in his expression. Was it anger, jealousy, fear? Kyle wasn't sure. He was only 8, and adults were hard to read even when they were human. Aliens were even harder. Dr. Matthews, Vex said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet hall. His translator made his words sound smooth and cultured, but there was something cold underneath. Congratulations on your recent successes. The council is very impressed with your discoveries. Thank you, Counselor, Kyle's father said. He kept his voice friendly but professional. We're honored to serve the Council's mission of peaceful exploration. Indeed, Vex said. His eyes moved to Kyle's mother. I understand you're preparing for another expedition. Somewhere in the outer territories, yes, that's correct, Catherine said. There's an uncharted system that shows promising signs of life. We leave in 3 weeks. How ambitious, Vex said. The words sounded like a compliment, but his tone suggested something else. Do be careful out there. The outer territories can be quite dangerous. It would be tragic if something happened to 2 of humanity's most celebrated explorers. Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the way Vex said that felt wrong. It felt like a threat disguised as concern. We're always careful, Richard said. His smile never wavered, but Kyle saw his hand move slightly closer to Catherine's. It was a protective gesture, subtle but there. The moment passed. Vex moved on to talk to other guests, and the party resumed its normal rhythm. But Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed. The air felt heavier somehow, like a storm was building just beyond the horizon. Later that night, Kyle lay in bed in their quarters aboard the station. The walls were decorated with pictures from his parents' expeditions. Alien landscapes, strange creatures, beautiful suns setting over worlds no human had seen before. He stared at them in the dim light, trying to memorize every detail. His door slid open quietly and his mother stepped in. She thought he was asleep, but Kyle kept his eyes open just enough to watch her. Catherine stood in the doorway for a long moment just looking at him. Then she walked over and sat on the edge of his bed. I know you're awake, she said softly. Kyle opened his eyes fully and sat up. His mother smiled and brushed his hair back from his forehead. Can't sleep. I was thinking about the vacation, Kyle lied. He didn't want to tell her about the weird feeling he'd gotten from Counselor Vex. Catherine studied his face for a moment. She'd always been good at knowing when he wasn't telling the whole truth. But instead of pushing, she just nodded. It's going to be wonderful. Real beaches, real mountains, real everything. And we'll have 2 whole weeks with no work, no diplomatic events, no aliens, just us. Will you be gone long this time? Kyle asked. On the expedition, I mean. 6 months, Catherine said. Same as last time. But we'll call you every week and we'll bring back so many pictures and stories. And when we get back, maybe you can come on the next trip with us. You're getting old enough. Kyle's heart leaped. Really? You mean it, really, she said. Your father and I have been talking about it. You're smart, Kyle. Smarter than most adults I know. You've learned 3 alien languages already, and you understand xenobiology better than some of our crew members. You'd be an asset to any expedition." Pride swelled in Kyle's chest. His parents didn't give empty compliments. If they said he was smart, they meant it. But first, Catherine continued, "You need to promise me something. While we're gone, you study hard. You listen to Ambassador Morrison. You be good. Can you do that?" "I promise," Kyle said immediately. Catherine leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "That's my boy. Now get some sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. Your father wants to take you to the engineering deck to see the new ship modifications." As she stood to leave, Kyle grabbed her hand. "Mom, do you ever get scared? Out there in space, exploring places no one's been before." She sat back down, and this time her smile was different, more real, more vulnerable. "All the time," she said. "Every single time we go through a jump gate to a new system, my heart pounds so hard I think everyone can hear it. Every time we step onto an unexplored planet, I'm terrified of what we might find." "But you do it anyway," Kyle said. "But we do it anyway," Catherine agreed. "Because being scared is how you know you're doing something important. If exploration was easy and safe, everyone would do it. But it's not. It's hard and dangerous and sometimes lonely. But it's also the most incredible thing in the universe. Every new world is a gift. Every new species is a chance to learn something amazing. And your father and I, we get to unwrap those gifts for all of humanity." Kyle thought about that. "I want to unwrap gifts too," he said finally. Catherine laughed softly and ruffled his hair. "Then you will, you absolutely will. Now sleep, explorer, tomorrow starts early." She left and Kyle lay back down. But sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying the party, kept seeing Counselor Vex's cold amber eyes. Something about the Krell counselor bothered him. It was the way adults looked when they were planning something but didn't want anyone to know. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Kyle spent every possible moment with his parents. They toured the engineering deck together, where Kyle got to sit in the pilot's seat of the exploration ship. His father showed him how the navigation systems worked, explaining jump calculations in a way that actually made sense. His mother let him look through her research notes, teaching him how to identify different types of plant life from just their cellular structure. They ate meals together in their quarters instead of at official dinners. They watched old Earth movies and laughed at the terrible special effects that made space look nothing like it really did. His father told jokes that weren't funny but made them all laugh anyway. His mother sang old songs from her childhood, slightly off-key but beautiful to Kyle's ears. Those 2 weeks were perfect. Kyle didn't want them to end, but they did end. The day came when his parents had to board their ship and leave. Kyle stood in the docking bay with Ambassador Morrison, watching as the crew loaded final supplies. His parents' ship was called the Star Wanderer, a mid-sized exploration vessel painted white with blue accents. It looked fast and capable, like it was eager to leap into the unknown. Richard knelt down in front of Kyle. His eyes were serious but warm. "Remember what we talked about. Study hard, be good, and before you know it, we'll be back, and the next time you come with us." Kyle nodded, not trusting his voice to stay steady. Catherine hugged him tight, so tight that Kyle could barely breathe. "We love you," she whispered, "so much. Every star we see will think of you, and we'll bring you back something special, something just for you." "I love you too," Kyle managed to say. They pulled back and Richard put a small device in Kyle's hand. It was a communicator specially programmed. "This is a direct link to our ship," he said. "If you ever need us, if anything ever happens, you press this button and we'll get the message, no matter where we are." Kyle clutched the device like it was the most valuable thing in the universe. "Okay," he said. His parents stood, waved one more time, and walked up the boarding ramp. Kyle watched until they disappeared inside the ship. Then he and Morrison moved to the observation gallery that overlooked the docking bay. The Star Wanderer detached from its docking clamps with a series of mechanical clanks and hisses. It floated gracefully through the bay's magnetic field, oriented itself toward the nearest jump gate, and then its engines flared bright blue. In seconds it was gone, just another point of light among billions. "They'll be fine," Morrison said. She put a hand on Kyle's shoulder. "Your parents are the best. Nothing's going to happen to them." Kyle wanted to believe her. He really did. But that cold feeling from the party was back, settling in his stomach like ice. Life on the station fell into a routine. Kyle attended school with other diplomats' children, learning history and mathematics and xenobiology. He was the youngest in most of his classes but kept up easily. Sometimes he found the lessons boring because he'd already learned the material from his parents, but he studied anyway, remembering his promise. Every week his parents called. The transmissions were delayed by distance, sometimes by hours, but they always came. His mother would tell him about the new system they were exploring. His father would show him samples of rocks or plants they'd collected. They looked happy, excited, safe. Kyle counted down the days until they came home. 6 months seemed like forever when you were 8 years old, but he marked each day on a calendar in his room, slowly filling in the squares. 180 days, then 179, then 178. He was down to 93 days when everything changed. Kyle was in class working on a mathematics problem when Ambassador Morrison appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale and her eyes were red. The teacher stopped talking mid-sentence. Morrison crossed the room without a word and knelt down next to Kyle's desk. "Kyle," she said softly, "we need to talk. Come with me, please." Something in her voice made Kyle's blood run cold. He stood up, his legs feeling weak, and followed her out of the classroom. They walked through the station's corridors in silence. Other people stared as they passed. Some looked sad, some looked shocked. Everyone seemed to know something Kyle didn't. Morrison led him to a private room, one of the diplomatic conference chambers. She sat him down in a chair that was too big for him. Then she sat across from him and took his hands in hers. "Kyle, I need you to be strong right now. Can you do that for me?" "What happened?" Kyle's voice came out small and scared. "Where are my parents?" Morrison's eyes filled with tears. "There was an accident. The Star Wanderer was near a neutron star doing a routine scan when their systems failed. The ship was pulled into the star's gravity well. They couldn't escape." Kyle stared at her. The words made sense individually, but together they didn't mean anything. His brain refused to put them together into something real. "Are they hurt?" he asked. "Can we go get them?" Morrison shook her head slowly. Tears ran down her cheeks. "No, Kyle, they're gone. The Star Wanderer was destroyed. There was nothing left. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The room tilted. Kyle felt like he was falling even though he was sitting still. His parents couldn't be gone. They were supposed to come back in 93 days. They were supposed to take him on their next expedition. They were supposed to be the best explorers humanity had ever produced. The best didn't die. The best came home. "No," Kyle said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "No, that's not right. They're too careful. Dad said they were always careful. Sometimes accidents happen even when we're careful," Morrison said. Her voice broke. "I know this isn't fair. I know it hurts. But Kyle, they loved you so much. Every message they sent, every transmission, they talked about you. You were their world." Kyle pulled his hands away from Morrison's. He stood up, needing to move, needing to do something. This was wrong, all wrong. There had to be a mistake. Ships didn't just fail like that. His parents' ship was new, well-maintained, state-of-the-art. Systems didn't just fail for no reason. "What kind of failure?" he asked. Morrison looked confused by the question. Kyle pressed on, his mind starting to work through the shock. "What system failed? Navigation, life support, engines?" Morrison hesitated. The report said it was catastrophic systems failure. Multiple systems at once. "Kyle, you don't need to worry about the technical details right now. But multiple systems don't fail at once," Kyle said. His father had taught him that. Ships had redundancies, backups for the backups. That's why space travel was safe. That's why his parents always came home. "Sometimes they do," Morrison said gently. "I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes terrible things just happen." Kyle wanted to argue more. He wanted to demand answers, to see the reports, to understand exactly what happened. But then something broke inside him. All the logic and questions shattered, and he was just a little boy whose parents were never coming home. He collapsed into Morrison's arms and cried. He cried until he couldn't breathe. He cried until his throat hurt and his eyes burned. He cried until there were no more tears left. Morrison held him through all of it, rocking him gently and whispering things he couldn't hear over his own sobs. The next few days blurred together. Kyle barely remembered them afterward. There were meetings with people he didn't know. Lawyers talked about custody and inheritance. Diplomats expressed their condolences in a dozen different languages. Everyone was very sorry. Everyone was very sad. But sorry and sad didn't bring his parents back. The funeral was held in the station's main assembly hall. Hundreds of people attended. Humans and aliens alike came to pay respects to the two explorers who had done so much for galactic peace and understanding. Kyle sat in the front row next to Morrison, wearing a black suit that felt too tight and too hot. He stared at the two empty caskets at the front of the room. They were symbolic, he knew. There were no bodies to bury. His parents had been vaporized in the heart of a neutron star. Speaker after speaker stood up to talk about Richard and Catherine Matthews. They talked about their discoveries, their courage, their dedication to humanity. They made his parents sound like heroes from a story, like legends instead of real people who told bad jokes and sang off-key and gave the best hugs in the universe. Kyle watched the crowd while people spoke. Most looked genuinely sad, but some didn't. Some looked uncomfortable, like they'd rather be anywhere else. And a very few, looked almost relieved. Counselor Vex sat in the back, his reptilian face impossible to read, but his body language was relaxed, too relaxed for a funeral. Next to Vex sat High Scholar Tarn of the Vor Collective, a being that looked like a walking mantis made of crystal. Tarn's multifaceted eyes caught the light, flashing briefly, and Kyle could have sworn the alien was pleased about something. The funeral ended. People filed past Kyle to offer condolences. He shook hands and nodded and said thank you over and over until the words lost all meaning. When Counselor Vex approached, Kyle felt his whole body tense. A tragic loss for humanity, Vex said. His voice was smooth and formal. Your parents will be remembered. Kyle looked up at the tall Krell, looked into those cold amber eyes, and something in those eyes confirmed what Kyle's gut had been telling him since the party. This alien knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. Thank you, Kyle said, keeping his voice flat. He wouldn't give Vex the satisfaction of seeing his pain. Vex studied him for a moment, then moved on. High Scholar Tarn followed without saying anything at all. That night, Kyle lay in bed in Morrison's quarters. She'd insisted he stay with her for a while, said he shouldn't be alone. But Kyle felt alone anyway, the most alone he'd ever felt in his life. He pulled out the communicator his father had given him, the one that was supposed to connect him to his parents no matter where they were. He pressed the button, knowing it wouldn't work but needing to try anyway. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. The Star Wanderer was gone. His parents were gone. And Kyle was 8 years old with no family left in the universe. He cried again, but this time it was different, quieter, harder. The kind of crying that came from a place so deep inside that it felt like it would never stop. And as he cried, clutching the useless communicator to his chest, one thought kept circling through his mind. This wasn't an accident. Somehow, someway, someone had killed his parents, and Kyle was going to find out who. He just didn't know yet that the truth would cost him everything. 3 months after the funeral, Kyle sat in Ambassador Morrison's office and tried to make sense of the data pad in front of him. The screen showed his parents' last transmission, sent just hours before the accident. His mother smiled into the camera, her face bright with excitement. Behind her, Kyle could see his father working at a console, making notes on something. Kyle, sweetheart, we found something incredible, his mother said in the recording. Her voice was full of wonder. A planet unlike anything we've ever seen. The biodiversity readings are off the charts. Your father thinks it might be the most dangerous Deathworld ever discovered, but it's also beautiful. Wait until you see the pictures. The transmission cut to images of a planet that looked like it was painted in shades of emerald and sapphire. Thick jungles covered most of the visible landmass. Storm systems swirled in the atmosphere like angry living things. Even through the screen, Kyle could tell this was a world where everything was bigger, sharper, and more alive than anywhere else. We're calling it Inferni's Prime, his father's voice came from off-screen, because it's a beautiful hell. Nothing here wants you to survive. But if something could survive here, it would be unstoppable. His mother laughed. Always the optimist, Richard. But he's right, Kyle. This place could change everything we know about adaptation and evolution. We're going to do a full survey before we head back. Should have preliminary data in a few weeks. The transmission ended. Kyle had watched it 17 times now, looking for anything that seemed wrong or out of place. His parents looked happy, excited, normal. There was no hint of danger, no sign that anything bad was about to happen. The office door slid open, and Morrison entered carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. She set one down in front of Kyle and took a seat behind her desk. "You're watching it again," she said. "It wasn't a question, I'm trying to understand," Kyle said. He closed the data pad and wrapped his hands around the warm cup. "Nothing makes sense." Morrison sighed. She looked tired. The past 3 months had aged her. "Kyle, I know this is hard. I know you want answers. But sometimes there aren't good answers. Sometimes terrible things just happen." "That's what everyone keeps saying," Kyle replied. "But nobody will show me the actual report. Nobody will explain exactly what failed on the ship. It's like everyone just accepted that they're gone and moved on." Morrison's expression softened. "We haven't moved on. Nobody has. Your parents were important to a lot of people. But Kyle, you're 8 years old. Some things are too complicated, too technical for someone your age to understand." "I understand plenty," Kyle said. His voice came out sharper than he intended. "I understand that ships don't just lose all systems at once. I understand that my parents were too good to make stupid mistakes. And I understand that Counselor Vex looked relieved at the funeral." Morrison leaned forward. "Kyle, you need to be very careful about what you're suggesting. Counselor Vex is one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. You can't just accuse someone like that without proof." "I'm not accusing anyone," Kyle said. "I'm just saying things don't add up." Before Morrison could respond, her desk console beeped. She glanced at it and her face went pale. "What is it?" Kyle asked. Morrison didn't answer right away. She read whatever was on her screen twice, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she looked at Kyle with an expression he'd never seen before. Fear mixed with anger and something else he couldn't identify. "Kyle," she said slowly, "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." "Can you do that?" He nodded, his heart starting to pound. "The Galactic Council has issued a summons. They want to see you tomorrow. There's been some kind of investigation into your parents' mission. They've found evidence of wrongdoing." Kyle felt like the floor had dropped away beneath him. "Wrongdoing? What kind of wrongdoing? My parents didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Morrison said quickly. "I know they didn't. But Kyle, someone has presented evidence that they violated exploration protocols, that they stole xenotechnology from restricted sites, that they were planning to weaponize data from Inferni's Prime." "That's a lie," Kyle said. His voice shook with anger. "That's all lies. My parents would never do that." "I believe you," Morrison said, "but the Council has seen evidence and they're taking it seriously." "Kyle, this is bad, very bad. If they rule against your parents' reputation, it could hurt all of humanity. It could undo years of diplomatic work." Kyle's mind raced. This was it. This was what had been bothering him. His parents hadn't died in an accident. They'd been killed because they found something someone didn't want them to find. And now whoever killed them was trying to destroy their reputation too. "We have to fight this," Kyle said. "We have to prove they're lying." "I'm trying," Morrison said. "But Kyle, you need to prepare yourself. The Council has already made up their minds. This hearing tomorrow is just a formality. They're going to rule against your parents and there's nothing I can do to stop it." "Then why do they want to see me?" Morrison looked down at her desk. "That's what scares me. I don't know. But Kyle, whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to stay calm. Don't argue with the counselors. Don't accuse anyone. Just answer their questions and let me handle the politics." Kyle wanted to argue. He wanted to scream that this was all wrong, all backwards. But he could see the fear in Morrison's eyes and it scared him more than anything else. If Morrison was afraid, then things were worse than he thought. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll be good. I promise." That night Kyle couldn't sleep. He lay in the guest room of Morrison's quarters and stared at the ceiling. His data pad sat on the nightstand, still showing images of Inferni's Prime. The beautiful hell his father had called it. What had they found there that was worth killing for? Kyle pulled up his mother's research notes on the data pad. She'd sent them weeks before the accident as part of her regular reports. Most of it was standard survey data. Atmospheric composition, gravity readings, temperature zones. But there were some notes that caught his attention. Indigenous life forms show unprecedented levels of adaptation. Apex predators display problem-solving skills that suggest high intelligence. Plant life contains compounds that could revolutionize medicine. This world is a treasure trove of biological data. Another note, this one marked as private, read differently. Richard thinks someone is monitoring our transmissions. Nothing concrete, just a feeling, but we're being careful about what we send. Full data will be delivered in person when we return. If anything happens to us, make sure Kyle gets the backup drive hidden in our quarters. Kyle sat up straight. A backup drive. His parents had hidden data somewhere. He'd been living in their quarters for months after they died before moving in with Morrison. Had anyone found it? Did anyone else even know it existed? He had to get that drive. But their quarters had been sealed by station security right after the funeral. Morrison said it was standard procedure, that they'd release the quarters eventually so Kyle could go through his parents' things. But eventually hadn't come yet. Kyle made a decision. Tomorrow, after the council hearing, he would find a way into those quarters, even if he had to break in. That backup drive might have the answers he needed. Morning came too quickly. Morrison woke Kyle early and made sure he was dressed properly. She'd gotten him a formal suit, black with subtle blue trim. It felt uncomfortable and restricting, but Morrison said appearances mattered at the council. They took a transport pod across the station to the council chambers. Kyle had been here before with his parents, but always as a visitor. Never like this. The massive doors were carved with symbols representing every species in the Galactic Council. They opened automatically as Morrison and Kyle approached, revealing the chamber beyond. The room was circular and huge. Tiers of seats rose up along the walls, filled with hundreds of counselors from dozens of species. At the center of the floor was a small platform where Kyle and Morrison were directed to stand. Above them, suspended in the air by some kind of anti-gravity technology, sat the 5 senior counselors who made the big decisions. Counselor Vex sat in the center position, his amber eyes fixed on Kyle. To his left was High Scholar Tarn of the Vor Collective, crystalline body reflecting the chamber lights. To his right were 3 counselors Kyle didn't recognize. One looked like a floating jellyfish, another resembled a walking tree, and the third was completely hidden in environmental armor. The chamber fell silent. Vex leaned forward, and his voice boomed through the space without any visible microphone. We are here to address a matter of grave importance. The late Dr. Richard Matthews and Dr. Catherine Matthews have been accused of crimes against the Galactic Council. Evidence has been presented showing they violated multiple exploration protocols, stole classified xenotechnology, and planned to use their discoveries for military purposes. That's not true, Kyle said before Morrison could stop him. The words burst out of him. My parents would never do that. Vex's eyes narrowed. The child will not speak unless given permission. Ambassador Morrison, control your ward. Morrison put a hand on Kyle's shoulder and squeezed gently. A warning. Kyle bit his tongue and forced himself to stay quiet. The evidence is conclusive, Vex continued. He touched a control on his chair, and holograms appeared in the center of the chamber. Images of documents, communications, equipment inventories. Data files from restricted databases were accessed using their security codes. Xenotechnology samples from quarantined sites were found in their ship's storage, and communications between them discuss weaponizing biological data from the planet they designated Infernes Prime. Kyle stared at the holograms. They looked real, but they couldn't be. His parents weren't criminals. Someone had faked this evidence, but how could he prove it? Morrison stepped forward. Counselor Vex, with respect, may I see the actual source files for this evidence? The Matthews family has a right to verify its authenticity. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent analysis teams, Vex said smoothly. Its authenticity is not in question. Then you won't mind sharing the source files, Morrison pressed. The source files are classified, High Scholar Tarn interjected. Their crystalline voice chimed like breaking glass. For security reasons, only senior counselors have access. How convenient, Morrison muttered, but not quietly enough. Counselor Vex's expression hardened. Ambassador Morrison, you will show respect in these chambers or you will be removed. Morrison bowed her head slightly. Apologies, Counselor, but I must advocate for my people. These accusations are severe, and the Matthews family has no opportunity to defend themselves. The Matthews family brought this upon themselves, Vex said. Had they followed proper protocols, had they respected council authority, they would still be alive. Instead, they pursued dangerous knowledge for personal gain. The council cannot tolerate such behavior, especially from humans. Your species is new to the galactic community. You must learn that actions have consequences. Kyle felt anger burning in his chest. This wasn't about his parents at all. This was about putting humanity in its place, about making sure humans knew they were still considered inferior by the older species. The council has reached a decision, Vex announced. The crimes of Richard and Catherine Matthews are proven. Their names will be stricken from the rolls of honor. All discoveries attributed to them will be credited to the council as a whole. Their research will be confiscated and classified. Morrison's face went red. Counselor, that's outrageous. You can't erase two people's entire life's work based on fabricated evidence. We can and we have, Vex said. And there is one more matter to address. He turned his full attention to Kyle. The child, Kyle Matthews, is the last of his family line. He carries the genetic legacy of proven criminals. The council has determined that such a bloodline cannot be allowed to threaten galactic peace. Kyle's blood ran cold. What did that mean? Were they going to kill him too? Wait, Morrison said. Her voice shook. Counselor Vex, Kyle is a child, an innocent child. You cannot punish him for his parents' alleged crimes. We do not intend to execute him, Vex said. That would be barbaric. No, we have chosen a different path. The child will be exiled. Exiled? Where? Morrison demanded. Vex's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. To the planet his parents discovered, Inferni's Prime. He will be given basic supplies and transported there within the week. If he survives, he will remain there for the rest of his life. If he does not survive, well, perhaps that is fate's justice. The chamber erupted. Multiple counselors shouted at once. Morrison was yelling something about laws and rights and humanity's response, but Kyle couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in his ears. They were going to abandon him on the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy. They were going to leave an 8-year-old boy alone in a place where everything wanted him dead. This was murder, just slower and more cruel than what they'd done to his parents. Order, Vex shouted. The chamber fell silent, though many counselors looked unhappy. The decision is final. The child will be exiled within the week. This serves both as punishment and warning. Let all species know that crimes against the council will be met with appropriate justice. He banged a gavel and the sound echoed through the chamber like a death sentence. Morrison grabbed Kyle's hand and pulled him toward the exit. Other humans in the chamber surrounded them, forming a protective barrier as they left. Kyle walked in a daze. This couldn't be real. They couldn't really do this, could they? Outside the chamber, Morrison led him to a private room. Several other Earth officials were already there, talking rapidly in urgent voices. When Morrison and Kyle entered, they all fell silent. We're contacting Earth immediately, one official said. He was a tall man with gray hair named Director Pierce. This is unconscionable. We'll fight this through every legal channel available. It won't matter, Morrison said. Her voice was flat, defeated. Vex has the votes. He's been planning this for months. Maybe since the Matthews died. Maybe even before. Then we refuse, Pierce said. We take Kyle back to Earth right now. We dare them to stop us. And start a war. Morrison shook her head. That's what Vex wants. An excuse to paint humanity as lawbreakers and aggressors. If we defy the council openly, we lose everything Richard and Catherine worked for. We lose our seat at the table. So we just let them kill a child. Pierce's face was red with anger. Kyle listened to them argue, but his mind was somewhere else. He was thinking about his mother's notes, about the backup drive hidden in his parents' quarters, about Inferni's Prime and what his parents had really discovered there. If they were going to send him to that planet anyway, then he needed to be prepared. He needed to know everything his parents knew about Inferni's Prime, and he needed to get that backup drive before someone else did. Excuse me, Kyle said quietly. The adults stopped arguing and looked at him. I need to go to my parents' quarters. I need to get some of their things before I leave. Morrison knelt down in front of him. Kyle, I'm so sorry. We're going to fight this. We're not giving up. I know, Kyle said, but if I have to go, I want something of theirs with me. Please. Morrison looked like she might cry. Of course. "Of course you can. I'll take you there right now." His parents' quarters were in the civilian section of the station. The door was still sealed with a security lock, but Morrison had authorization to open it. The lights came on automatically as they entered, revealing a space that looked exactly as Kyle remembered. His mother's research equipment on one desk, his father's navigation charts on another, pictures of their family on the walls. "Take your time," Morrison said gently. "I'll wait outside." "Thank you," Kyle said. As soon as Morrison left, Kyle started searching. His mother's note had said the backup drive was hidden in their quarters, but where? He checked desks, drawers, closets, nothing. He looked behind pictures, under furniture, inside equipment cases. Still nothing. Think, Kyle told himself. Where would his mother hide something important? Somewhere only family would think to look. Somewhere meaningful. His eyes landed on a photograph on his mother's desk. It showed the three of them on Earth during their last vacation. They were standing on a beach, the ocean behind them. His father had his arm around Catherine. Kyle stood in front, holding a seashell he'd found. It had been special to him because it was perfectly spiral, like a tiny galaxy frozen in calcium. Kyle picked up the picture frame. It was heavier than he remembered. He turned it over and saw that the backing wasn't the standard thin plastic. It was thicker. He carefully pried it open and found a small data chip taped to the inside. His mother had hidden it in a picture of their last happy moment together. Kyle's eyes burned with tears, but he blinked them back. He couldn't cry now. He had to stay focused. He pocketed the data chip and quickly grabbed a few other items. A jacket that had belonged to his father. A necklace his mother always wore. His own stuffed animal that he'd left here months ago. Then he left the quarters before Morrison got suspicious. That night, back in Morrison's quarters, Kyle waited until she was asleep. Then he pulled out his data pad and carefully inserted the chip his mother had hidden. The screen lit up and a file directory appeared. Hundreds of documents, images, videos, and research notes. All of it marked with his parents' personal encryption. Kyle's fingers shook as he opened the first file. It was a video message from his mother, recorded just days before they died. "Kyle, if you're watching this, then something has happened to us," his mother said. She looked tired and worried. "We don't have much time, so I'll be brief. Everything we sent in our official reports about Inferni's Prime was true, but incomplete. We didn't dare send the full data through normal channels because we know someone is watching us." His father appeared on screen next to her. "We found something incredible on Inferni's Prime. Ancient ruins. Technology far beyond anything the Council has. And evidence that the planet was deliberately engineered as a training ground by a species that vanished thousands of years ago. They called themselves the Architects. This discovery threatens everything the older species believe about their place in the galaxy," his mother continued. "The Krell, the Vor, and several others have built their power on controlling advanced technology. If humanity gains access to Architect knowledge, it changes the entire balance of power. We believe Counselor Vex and High Scholar Tarn are planning something," his father said. "We've detected monitoring on our communications. Our ship systems have been accessed remotely. Someone wants to make sure this data never reaches Earth." "Kyle," his mother said, her eyes intense and serious, "if something happens to us, you need to protect this data. Share it with people you trust absolutely. Make sure the truth comes out. And whatever you do, don't trust the Council. Some of them are good, but others will do anything to maintain their power." The video ended. Kyle sat in the darkness, his data pad screen the only light in the room. His parents had known. They'd known someone wanted them dead. They'd known about the conspiracy, and they'd been right about everything. He spent the rest of the night reading through the files. There were detailed maps of Inferni's Prime. Information about the planet's ecosystems, its predators, its weather patterns. Instructions on how to survive in extreme conditions, and most importantly, locations of Architect ruins and caches of their technology. His parents had been preparing for him. Even if they died, they'd left him everything he needed to survive on Inferni's Prime. They'd known there was a chance he'd end up there. Had they predicted the Council would exile him, or had they just been incredibly thorough? Either way, Kyle wasn't going to Inferni's Prime helpless and ignorant. He was going prepared. And he was going to survive. Not just survive, but thrive. He He was going to become so strong that when he finally came back, the council would regret ever touching his family. The next few days passed in a blur. Morrison fought the exile decision through every channel she could find. Earth's government lodged formal protests. Other friendly species on the council spoke against it, but Vex had the votes and his coalition held firm. The exile would proceed. Kyle was allowed to pack one survival kit. The council provided standard equipment: a week's worth of rations, a water filtration device, a basic shelter unit, and a multi-tool. They also gave him his mother's research tablet, probably not realizing how much data it actually contained. Morrison tried to slip him additional supplies, but council security was watching everything. She managed to give him one extra thing, though: a small emergency beacon that could transmit through jump space. "It won't work right away," she said quietly as she hugged him goodbye. "Earth doesn't have the resources to mount a rescue yet, but in a few years we will. When that day comes, this beacon will lead us straight to you. Don't give up hope, Kyle." "I won't," Kyle promised. "And Morrison, thank you for everything. Tell Earth what really happened. Tell them the truth." "I will," Morrison said. Tears ran down her face. "And Kyle, your parents would be so proud of how brave you're being. Don't ever forget that." The transport that would take him to Inferni's Prime was a cargo ship called the Cold Light. It was old and industrial, nothing like the comfortable passenger ships Kyle had traveled on before. He was the only passenger, locked in a small cabin under guard. The journey took 2 weeks. Kyle spent the time studying everything on the data chip. He memorized maps, learned about the planet's seasons and dangers, and practiced with the survival equipment. He was only 8 years old, but he was going to have to grow up fast. When they finally arrived at Inferni's Prime, the ship captain came to his cabin. He was a grizzled old human who looked uncomfortable with his assignment. "Kid, I'm sorry about this," the captain said. "If it were up to me, I'd turn this ship around and take you home, but they've got tracking on us. We don't have a choice." "I understand," Kyle said. "It's not your fault." The captain handed him a small package. "This isn't much, but it's some extra rations. Food tablets, high nutrition, should last you a few extra weeks if you're careful, and this." He held out a knife in a sheath. "It was my grandfather's. Good steel might help you down there." Kyle took the gifts with trembling hands. "Thank you. Really, thank you." The captain nodded gruffly. "You seem like a smart kid. Smarter than most adults I know. If anyone can survive down there, it might be you. Good luck." Kyle was loaded into an escape pod with his supplies. Through the small window, he could see Inferni's Prime growing larger. The planet was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Green jungles covered most of the surface, broken by massive mountain ranges and vast oceans. Storm systems raged across the equator. It looked like a world that was angry at its own existence. The pod detached from the Cold Light with a jolt. Kyle felt his stomach drop as they fell toward the planet. The descent was rough, the pod shaking and rattling as it hit atmosphere. Heat built up around the exterior until Kyle was sure they'd burn up. But the pod held together, and eventually the shaking stopped. They were gliding now, falling more gently toward a specific landing zone. According to his mother's notes, the council would drop him in the southern continent, one of the most dangerous regions. But it was also where some of the architect ruins were located. If Kyle could reach them, he'd have shelter and access to technology. The pod hit the ground hard. Kyle's teeth rattled and something in the ceiling cracked, but he was alive. The door blew open automatically, filling the pod with humid air that smelled like growing things and decay. Kyle unbuckled himself and climbed out. He stood on alien soil for the first time, his survival pack on his back and the captain's knife at his belt. The jungle around him was alive with sound. Birds, or something like birds, called from the canopy. Insects buzzed and clicked. Something large moved through the undergrowth nearby, and Kyle froze. The thing moved away, and Kyle slowly released the breath he'd been holding. This was it. This was his new home, a planet that wanted him dead. A planet where he had to survive with no help, no backup, no second chances. Kyle looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds and the atmosphere and the void of space, Earth waited. His real home. The place he belonged. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I promise. I'll survive this, and I'll come back, and I'll make everyone who did this pay." Then he turned away from the crashed pod and walked into the jungle. Every step took him deeper into a world that shouldn't exist, a world that would either kill him or make him stronger than any human had ever been. Kyle Matthews was 8 years old. He was alone, he was afraid, but he wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever.